everyone, and welcome to the first podcast of Sharin Stories. Hello, hello, hello.
Hi.
Welcome. Thank you. We are at Sharin Stories, where we, share stories about our mental health. At Sharin Stories, we do not discount. We do not judge any of the stories that come through. And in no way are we a replacement for mental health professionals. However, it is just a way for us to get everyday people to be comfortable sharing their stories when it comes to mental health. There's too much of a stigma revolved around it currently, and we would like to fix that. So the best way to do it is just have a little fun as we kind of navigate this so-called life that we're living. So first off, my name is Andrew, or Peaks, as everybody's going to call me on the podcast. Very nice to meet you.
I'm Sarah States.
I'm Paul. Paul.
Thank you.
Paul.
Just Paul. There is no last name. Never has been. Never will be. So each week we're going to be sharing a story with you. One special guest. The first 3 weeks you're going to be hearing from the three of us, and we are going to be telling you all about our struggles or our life with mental health. And as we go through those, there will be conversation, there will be questions, hopefully a few laughs here and there, most of those coming from Paul. And we'll see as we have a good time talking about, these hard topics. So we're going to get underway. Is there anything anybody would like to say before we get started?
I'm excited, and thank you guys for tuning in.
I have nothing further to say.
Wow. The excitement grows.
It's like we're in cold.
We're gonna all have one episode where nobody has anything to say. We sit there for 20 minutes, and it will be our introverted episode where we show you it's okay to be an introvert. You don't have to worry about always talking and always being involved in things. But I will go into my story now as we get moving on. I think it's important to get this started, and I'm excited to be the first one ever. So I'm going to start at around 12 years old, because up until then, I don't think I was really self-aware enough to kind of go through the issues that I gained throughout high school. So when high school started coming along, I started to see a lot of depression creep in ways that I could not understand. I had no way of manifesting exactly what was happening to me. Days were going by where I'd be waking up and I would be sad to be alive even. I wasn't excited about anything that was happening. And a lot of it was stemming from the fact that, in my opinion, there was nothing I really held dear. There's no emotional connect for me to just about anything, and that in itself was terrifying to me. So as someone who kind of believes, you gotta do the right thing in this world, I didn't actually care about what I was doing. I just kind of was going through motions for being a good person, but not actually in any way emotionally connecting to the people that I was being a good person to. I could go long periods of time without talking to anybody, without feeling any sort of remorse. I mean, other than my family, which will always remain extremely dear to me and close to me, like things like friends were disposable, in my opinion, at this time. And if deaths happened in my life, I didn't seem to care too much about them. Obviously you'd get that initial effect of whatever it might be, but they didn't hold a lasting impact on me. It was almost as if I expected it to come. And that's where, for me, depression started to creep in. I felt too lucky in this world to be sad, and it only weighed on it even more. I think that's a weird concept for a lot of us. I think we just have this feeling of we shouldn't have these issues, so oftentimes it just creates more. I don't want to sit here and I didn't want to sit there and be depressed. I didn't want to sit there and be anxious, but I felt like I had no control over my brain because I was still those things, even though I didn't want to be them. And I think that can cause a lot of just building blocks on top of one another to create that an original form of, depression, to the point where we build enough blocks that, we get to that mindset of maybe this world is better without us. And our goal, I guess, here and just anywhere in life, I think, is to kind of get better one day at a time, whatever way possible. So as I go through my story, I'm hopefully going to give you ideas on how I got better as well. Is there any questions beforehand? And you guys listening at home, if there's any relation to this, I'm excited to hear questions on email before I go even more in depth onto exactly what happened, that got me to that point. Anything you guys are interested in?
No, but I can totally relate with the feeling of, I guess I would almost equate it to guilt of being like, oh, but like from on paper, my life is really not all that bad. Like I have a great loving family. I'm in school. I have all these things, I'm on the soccer team or whatever and all these different things. So like, why do I feel this way? And I feel
Yeah.
like, yeah, exactly what you're saying. Like it almost feels like guilt, and that just layers on another sort of like complex layer to your anxiety. And it just like, yeah, kind of like what you said, building blocks that just like add up to this like complex being of who we are. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I like what Sarah said. It's just like I feel like that's kind of like all a similarity to us, where it's just like all only like what Sarah said, all in paper. It looks so good because we're living in like, I guess, middle class America, and we're like just so lucky to be living in America that many people are struggling to be in, and now we're in this position. And yeah, I mean, it's just so complex, and I guess like it just shows that like nothing is always as it seems to be, So yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of times what we see with mental health is circumstance is non-existent. There's no correct circumstance you can be in that you escape from this mental health, and vice versa. I know the poorest people in the world that are the happiest people I've ever met. I know countries that don't give their citizens much of anything and they never leave a smile off their face. And I know people who have everything that really are struggling on a daily basis. Even no matter what the circumstances there. And it kind of took me a long time to get to that idea for myself to kind of help me in my depression stance. So that's really the main format that got me out of depression, is kind of realizing that I'm not even close to the only person who feels this guilt. I like the way you put it, Sarah, who feels this guilt. There are millions and millions of other people who think the same exact way. Or at least similar, because no two stories are the same. But I mean, you do got to draw all of these similarities. That's the whole point, is making it more relatable for all of us, to each other, and then to hopefully our audience as we grow and more people get comfortable sharing their stories as well and get related to it. So I'm going to keep going then and kind of touch onto the anxiety aspect of it all, because that depression that I slowly grew kind of shifted its way away from depression. And one of the reasons for that was weed. I started smoking a lot of weed at a certain point, and I'm not in no way suggesting it as a medicinal purpose or anything. It helped me get rid of depression. However, anxiety started to grow exponentially for me from that point on. So you get your you win some, you lose some, I guess, in that regard. But anxiety started to really grow for me around college. I started to realize that I constantly was thinking in my head during conversations, just any given moment I had to make a decision. My mind was running at 1,000 miles a minute, and I could not keep up in the slightest. I don't know Paul, I know this doesn't happen with us. Sarah, I'm not sure if you've ever been a part of this, but if you ever watch something with me, a movie or a TV show, we will spend a full movie or TV show trying to pick a movie or a TV show. It is impossible for me to settle on something. And I'm using that as the lowest level of example. on how it affects my life. But the point is, it is impossible. It has been in the past, and it is getting a little better, but it is still difficult for me to make decisions. I constantly am worrying about every decision is being anxiety inducing, and every choice I have is a possible for regret. I think this mindset is extremely dangerous, but it happens to be oftentimes what I'm thinking about is, whoa, if I say this in this situation, how are people going to respond? Before I even say it, it may not even be a bad thing. It may not even be a problem. It could be a joke. It could be anything. No matter what I am thinking about or talking about, I have to go through a process that states that, first of all, is this acceptable to be said? Second of all, is the person listening going to enjoy hearing it? And third of all, am I saying it for a reason that am I actually believing what I'm talking about, or am I doing whatever I'm doing just for the hell of it? Right.
And what it's that does that come from, like some kind of event that caused that? And because like for me, from what, because I'm like that as well, but that only comes from because just coming from the Asian background, it's always so much pressure. That's why it's so hard for me to make a decision. It's because like I have to make the best decision, because coming from my parents, it's just like they always expect the best and only the best, and that's why I have so much anxiety making a decision. Is that the same for you, or?
Well, I will say I did not have I was not pressured into anything when I was a kid. I have extremely loving parents who always kind of let me be myself. They still let me be myself when I decide to pick up my career and move halfway across the world and then come back without a plan. They have always allowed me to be myself. So I don't know exactly if there's a specific situation that it comes from, or if it just comes from social pressures overall. Things like, I don't know, social media may have an impact for me, but I really couldn't tell you a specific area of where that anxiety comes from, other than the sense of maybe I'm just not fully comfortable talking about this stuff. As the one thing I do myself always feel is I don't like to be a burden on other people. And a lot of times when people talk about mental health, I think the people receiving the information kind of take it as I'm victimizing myself, or I'm searching for pity, when in no regards do I care about either of those things, right?
Yeah.
I'm talking about it because it's a big part of my life. And I think that if something is this large and has this much of a role on my life, there's no reason I should sit here and hide it from anybody anymore.
Yeah.
There's just no benefit to it for me, other than a few people, if anybody, is not going to judge me, right? Because we have to remember that people are not thinking about other people's minds, even though I feel like I am all the time. I constantly am making a decision out of nowhere just because I think this person might like it, or vice versa. So I do want to, I'm kind of losing myself a little bit. I want to go back on more so how it affected me, and how my life has been a little bit different. This anxiety more so, because as I said, the depression was very short-lived, compared to a lot of people who kind of have it as a lifetime thing. A lot of people have specific types of depression. As we said, we are not doctors, so we cannot go into those, nor will we. But the point is, it exists in every different form, and it exists different for everybody. So I want to now go on to the anxiety portion and kind of tell you exactly how that has affected my life. So outside of the decision making, I have kind of shut off people socially up until about a year and a half ago. I have a very tight knit group of friends, and my family's always a high support system, but it got to the point where I started to, even around them, lose my comfortability, where in the past that was never even a thought process. But as my anxiety grew more and more, it stopped being about, picking a movie or calling a pizza place and ordering something. It started to be more about them and the people around me and how they view me. And for me, there was no possible way they were viewing me in the way that I wanted them to view me. So I started to kind of break off from them as a whole. I always dropped hints. My friends will tell you, I always dropped hints where one day I'm just going to up and disappear and not come back to Buffalo. It was played off as a joke between our friends, but like it was a thought process for a while. I was really thinking about just completely shutting off like my world and switching it up completely. Kind of keeping that minimal contact, erasing social media, and just kind of moving overseas somewhere and starting new. It wasn't till years later that I realized that this is an option, while at the same time not, uprooting my entire life and not destroying my relationships that I currently have and everything. But and these are my best friends in the world, and people that I know today still who will probably end up listening to this and in no way would ever judge me or put any sort of, onus on exactly what I'm talking about. But I still, for somehow, felt like they were, looking at everything that I was doing under a microscope. And I started to kind of just back away from them instead. I started to, instead of saying, hey, I want to talk about this with you guys, I'm just going to act like it's not happening and make up excuses to not see you. Because I got to the point where I started to care so much about everyone that I just stopped doing things that people could think about. If I wasn't in the picture, if I didn't exist to you, there's no way I had to prove, myself to you. There's no way I had to actually get your approval because you didn't know, there was nothing to approve, right? So I really started to, like just disintegrate from friends. I stopped throughout all my travels. I've met a ton of people. I stopped keeping up to date with them. I didn't message them on a constant basis like I used to. I hope I can still, reach out to them and they still will kind of reciprocate. But the point is, I was the one breaking all these relationships off for the sole reason that I've convinced myself that they would probably do the same if it wasn't socially unacceptable.
So do you feel that this was induced by anxiety, or was it more like anxiety inducing?
I think it was kind of a feedback loop in that regard.
Yeah.
I think it caused anxiety extensively. But I think the reason it started was because I was anxious in the first place to begin with. And for me, my anxiety just grew from not talking about it. And honestly, ultimately brought me to the point where, 6 months being in a home, being required to quarantine kind of was the thing that woke me up and said, what the hell? Just fucking do it. Go for it all and see what happens. Put up a website, tell your story, and move on from there. And hopefully other people will tell their story. I know for a fact I'm in no regards even close to the only person it probably in my house that has a story, right? Even though as good friends with them, we're not always talking about it. So I felt like if I could come up here and, talk about what I talk about, maybe throughout time, I'd be able to do it, in front of friends and just kind of make it easier for me moving forward. I have, recently kind of convinced myself that I don't have to worry as much about everything. And a big part of that was the change that I made in my life. I was a financial advisor for a while, and I decided to move to Korea. Like I said, I learned that I can do the uproot my life, but at the same time, keep in contact with everybody. So I didn't delete my social media. I didn't stop texting friends, though a few of my friends I didn't talk to the entire time. That's not the point. The point is, I was able to kind of make this move and starting to get a little more comfortable with myself. Another thing that you can see on, my story online, is that I was a different person amongst every single member of my life. Every single person in my life saw a different me. I had my family who saw the weird, just like out there kind of crazy little brother who was always pinching them and telling them how much he loved them, and just nonstop affection. And then you have the too cool for school Andrew, who meets all his friends and wants to impress them, and says all this stuff and acts all tough. And then you had the alone Andrew, who really didn't have many emotional connects to anybody, but still like always wanted to be out there. And then you have the colleague Andrew, who you worked with and always seemed to be fun loving, but he hated his job and probably didn't, like care much for exactly what was going on around him at that time. And I just kind of realized I was keeping up with how many different forms of myself when I only need to have one, and that just combines what I am from all of those different forms. So once I moved to Korea, I was able to do that. I was able to completely, be myself from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed. Work, I didn't have to be a different person, other than obviously, more professional. But that's every work. I didn't have to act different around my colleagues. I didn't have to pretend I was something that I wasn't. I just always was constantly able to be myself and be out there, and it just felt amazing. And my job was the first time I was really into my job as well. That helped a lot. It made me realize that in the past, like for me, I need something that I care about for me to want to continue to do it. And if I'm going to be working in today's society 50, 60 hours some week, I need to actually care about exactly what I'm doing. So I kind of started to realize more of life should be based on my decision than the people around me. When there was less people around me to kind of make decisions for me, it was a really nice change of pace. So that kind of thing helped a lot. I would say for me, anxiety is still a huge part. You two can attest to this. At the beginning of this podcast, before we put the video up, I was definitely nervous, shaking a little bit, moving back and forth. You saw a lot of this, which was me moving just all around for those just listening. And I mean, it took us one try. I couldn't even do the opening "Hello, my name is" because I was so nervous to start. So
we got a minute and 10 seconds in before we had to stop recording.
Just yeah. So it still exists. I still, don't ask me to pick a movie. It's not possible. Actually, you can ask me, but because if I'm not the one who's involved in watching it, I am all right at giving you some examples. So do come to me if you need something like that. But I want to try and make myself, the one things I want to do is I want to be more accessible to people. I want to, answer my calls. I oftentimes goes extending times without looking at my phone. I just want to be more accessible to people and kind of feel like get myself back out there so that I am, back to who I was when I was young, this person who didn't smile, as my family would put it, in the most endearing way possible. I promise you, it's not making fun of me. I was a happy idiot. That's what we call it, a hazahorumenos. That's Greek for happy idiot. And it just means someone who is just out there and excited all the time. And that's kind of what I always was. I was the person who didn't stop smiling. And I think my face kind of naturally sits in a smile, but oftentimes I'm not feeling that same exact way like I used to. So I want to try and work my way back to that. I tried for 2 sessions. I went to a therapist. I didn't love my therapist. I think that's a huge thing when it comes to therapy, is finding a person that you are comfortable with, not just talking about, who also seems knowledgeable. I think is important. So when it comes to therapy, if you try once, don't follow me and not try again. Look for more. I'm also constantly looking for therapists and trying to hear people's ideas on exactly where to go. But I do think they are extremely important in kind of getting concrete information down in yourself rather than, just talking it out like we're going to be doing. You need a little bit of both. You need a little column A, a little column B. You need to get comfortable with yourself talking about it with someone individually, like a therapist. And that way you can be comfortable talking about it with hopefully everybody in the end. So is there any questions from you two, my glorious panel and teammates going on?
I mean, that's just super inspiring that you went through that. And it's just like, even now, like you going through just like speaking like in front of a camera makes you anxious. That's just so, and you just actually just did it. It's just so inspiring. Like you just did it, and it's just a lot of people don't, a lot of people that I know, and especially like it'll be weird. Like it'll take them a while to actually say some stuff in front of like a camera. And these are people who are like influencers. They're just like, they're like that's their job to be on camera. And it takes them a while because they're so anxious and they have so much anxiety. But for you to just do that and just, it's just really cool. Like, so
I appreciate it. And I think everybody to know that anybody who comes on here, anybody who does really anything to help themselves is doing as much as I'm doing. It's just not, we live in a world where it is so difficult to have this conversation with anybody. And we just don't want it to be the case anymore, right? We don't want it to be difficult. What's the point? For me, I'm a firm believer in going out of your comfort zone, even though for me, I always have anxiety inducing stuff. But if I don't get that anxiety, then there's no way I can get better. So at times I have to put myself in these awkward situations, in these situations that I'm not fully comfortable with, for me to get better. And if I can't come on here and do the exact thing that I want other people to do, I am just hypocritical. And in regards, it's not how I'm going to run, how we're going to run Sharin Stories. So as we kind of get to know us, all three of us better, you're going to realize, we're just trying to have conversations about this stuff. Have a good time.
I love this because I think it's like, I've just realized how awesome this podcast is going to be because Peaks, I've known you for a really long time, or at least I think it's been a long time. And we went to school together growing up, and like I knew nothing about this, even from the beginning, starting this podcast and even talking about it. Like I didn't know your story or like everything that you yourself have been through and your personal journey and what you're still sort of going through and the evolution of your story. I didn't know any of that until just now, and we've known each other. So I can't wait to, just hear from other people outside the three of us too, whether they're friends or strangers. And just, there are so many things that you said that I connect with and can understand myself, that I can only imagine how many other people can take away from what you just said.
Right. I think that's the thing. There's always going to be so many connections between any story that you have. Like we said, they're all different, but there's always going to be connections. And a lot of times we feel alone in mental health. So the more and more times, it's like when we see conspiracy theories on YouTube. Like you're going to click on one conspiracy theory on YouTube, and then on the sidebar, there is going to be 1,000 videos that are agreeing with this, that are saying this is correct, this conspiracy, and you're going to read through them, and you are going to slowly develop the idea that this conspiracy theory is real. The same exact thing happens with anything. So like with mental health, if you're going to hear more and more stories that relate to you, you in turn are going to feel like you are not alone. It's just going to happen that you are not the only person who believes this. And you're going to create a conspiracy theory about yourself that there is a million other people out there that struggle from the exact same thing you are. And then you all of a sudden are not going to feel alone. So therefore, I'm hoping, I mean, a lot of times that's the main goal, is you just kind of realize that you relate to millions of people on a daily basis. You walk by someone, I guarantee you have some similarities, and I know you also have some differences. The point isn't to pick out which one is which. The point is to be comfortable sharing you as a person, who you are, and whatever that might be. I think we've had a chance to touch on my story. Is there anything you guys want me to go more in depth on my story? Anything that you think I left out?
Like moving to Korea, that's just like, wow. Like, how old were you when you moved to Korea? Like,
I was 20. I was 25. So
uh,
I moved. I was moved when I was 24 because I turned 25 while I was there. So I moved there when I was 24, and
that's so
it
crazy.
was
That's like such a big step. Like,
it was a big step, but honestly, it was the first time in my life I kind of felt relaxed.
wow,
The
that's so amazing.
first, well, not the first time in my life. Like I said, a lot of my stuff happened. It happened a little later in life. I didn't really fully get too self-aware on myself until later. But I just was able to jump in immediately. The Saturday that I landed at 2:00. I stayed one night in China, like 24 hours of flights. I landed and I took like a 3-hour nap, and then I met up with a whole Facebook group that we had, and we went out till 6 in the morning that night. And just from that point, it was easy. I made friends that I am going to be friends with for the rest of my life on that night. Number one, I just was myself from the start, and number two, Korea wasn't the biggest culture shock. I've been to other countries that I have, kind of. Paul, you're living in the Philippines right now. That's a culture shock where you see a totally different style of life.
Yeah.
Economically, it's nowhere near right. Terms of presidency, nowhere near. We're not going to get into any of that. But the point is, they exist. I mean, from Philippines perspective, I know there is some insanity that goes on in terms of, non-tolerance. One thing that I will say, kind of off topic a little bit, is Korea also kind of brought a sense of how important mental health is to my life, because I looked at kids as I taught kids who had ADHD, ADD, and dyslexia. These kids clearly suffered from these issues, but Korea doesn't really take mental health as anything other than weakness. So a lot of times you see, there is no such thing as diagnosing these kids, because it's just move on. They are just looked at as, by teachers, by their parents, as the, less intelligent, less calm members of society. You're kind of the outcast just for having, these mental health issues, when there are ways that we can help these people, learn the same exact way that other people learn when it comes to actual social cognitive disorders, and vice versa when it comes to things like anxiety and depression, where it's, there are ways to kind of help these people navigate their life. And I'm really excited to hear your guys' stories, the two of you, because I already know a little bit about them, but going in depth, like you said, Sarah, is you just learned so much about each individual person, and exactly how they felt. So I don't want to go for too long. I think these are heavy topics, and I don't want to make them, hour long each week. So I do want to move on, and each week kind of present a question at the end of our podcast, at the end of our stories, that is just something for us to kind of think about as viewers, as listeners, and as ourselves, Sarah, Paul, and me, Peaks. So my question, guys, is in society, since we were born, do we think we have made it easier to talk about mental health with each other? And if so, how have we made it easier, or how have we made it more difficult? I'll let you guys start. I have an answer as well, I think, but if anybody wants to go first.
Oh.
I mean, like growing up, it's like, especially in the 90s, growing up in the 90s, mental health was like non-existent. Like everything was just so chaotic. Like it was just so different. Like back in like growing up in the 90s, like everything was just like more explicit, but then nothing was about mental health. Everybody was just like, say what you want to say, don't get offended. If you're offended, then you're like a little bitch and stuff like that. And it's
Yeah, it's true. It really is true.
because like I grew up watching like The Real World and everything on MTV, and like Jerry Springer and all that stuff, where everything was just like no filter and everything, but nothing pushed really mental health like on the forefront, but now it's just like everything is just so much more comfortable talking about mental health, I guess, because a lot more influential people are coming forward saying that, like, hey, I struggled with this. And especially a lot of celebrities now, or like influencers, are really struggling in the industry. And
Yeah.
I guess, and it's, and I'm so proud of people that's just putting mental health forward into part of their story. And I think it's easier for me now to talk about it, just because, like, as a guy, and it's more acceptable now to talk about, like, it's okay to cry now if you're a guy, not like back then where it's just like, not, if you're gonna cry, don't even talk to me and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, now it's just like I feel like I'm a little bit more comfortable talking about it, so.
I think society overall, there's been definitely a bigger push, because I think it's a sign of the times. Like the issues that kids and like us as kids faced growing up, what with the emergence of social media and all these different platforms where we put ourselves out there, and like, it's just like caused this sort of like snowball of its own issues, like image issues and like body dysmorphia and just like gossip and bullying. Like we grew up, I feel like, at the beginning of the peak of that.
Yeah.
And I think like because of that, young people who are now our age or slightly younger, we're starting to see the result of like what that did, like what having an iPhone and Instagram
Yes.
and like having it not be monitored and just like us discovering it has done. Like we're now seeing the effects of that, I feel like. And because of that, there has been a bigger push to talk about mental health. And I think that does come from influencers, because they're the ones that also sort of like lived through it too, and they have this platform to speak out about it. So I do think in some ways we are able to talk about it a little bit easier, especially since as humans now, I feel like our lives are on view for everybody. So like you can either pretend to be someone else, or you can be completely transparent and go into depth and show people what,
Yeah.
your issues and like what's going on inside of you. So I think in some ways we're like, I guess it's like a totally two ends of the spectrum. Either you have these sorts of things, these pressures from outside, and you're hiding it, and you're maybe like, putting an image out there that's not completely exposing like all the things that are going on inside of you, or you're able to use whatever platforms you have and sort of like illuminate this sort of like mental health topic and how it affects you and the people that, follow you, whether that's like on social media or in life or whatever. So I think we're like in this like weird area where it's like we're either super quiet about it or we're super involved with it.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's really what social media does as a whole. It just kind of creates an extreme from both ends, where I think it is beneficial in regards that, like Paul and you are saying, is more and more people are speaking out on it, and that in turn is making people more comfortable with it, especially when you see celebrities say something. I mean, that just hits home for a lot of people who put a lot of onus on exactly what they do in their everyday life, to let their fans know that they're struggling is important. But at the same time, right, you have the other people that are on Instagram that are putting out what looks like the most pristine life in existence. They don't leave a poolside, or even me, I use my Instagram to put up pictures of me traveling. I use it maybe outside of my travels. I've probably put like 5 pictures up. But I probably have a couple hundred pictures up there while I'm traveling. I'm not living my life from place to place. I just happen to, those are the most exciting points for me, in my opinion. And I want to have them for the future, so that when I come back in 20, 30 years, I have like my favorite pictures are all in one place. It's not a bad like format for that. But that being said, if people are only seeing the best, they start to question themselves. So I think social media kind of has that, double-edged sword, where it can be really good on one end, but it can be also very detrimental on the other. That being said, I think overall it is being beneficial. It is beneficial, and I think you can see the benefits that it's causing in what Sarah's saying, the lower generation. I think that Gen Z, and I think it's Gen Z, the one below us, below millennials, that are just brazen. I mean, these kids are willing to do anything and say anything.
So
they don't give a shit anymore. It's really, it is impressive. They really are. I feel like people always hate the generation below them. They're like, they suck, like boomers. Boomers hate millennials. They think we're just the worst. Millennials don't like boomers, obviously, either way. And there's always some sort of weird animosity, as if the generation didn't create the society that the next generation grew up in. I'm not sure how that like format comes into play and how you can still hate the next generation. But I am just seeing a bunch of 16-year-old kids being willing to step up to like a 60-year-old grown man and tell him he's a fucking idiot for being racist or something like that.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have existed back then. So I think we're seeing, with this social media, I think we're seeing people able to just be out there and brazen and ready to go and shooting off from the mouth, which can be detrimental at times. But in terms of mental health, I think it's important, because it means that they are able to shoot off at the mouth of that. As long as they are not, pushing it down, like we're saying, in these discounting these stories or judging them. And when you guys do your stories, you're going to see how different your 2 stories are. That's a huge thing with today's, and with all, we cannot discount anybody's story. Nobody's story is less than another's. And we can't sit here and say, wow, you lived through that. That's not hard. Listen to my story, right? We're not one-upping each other. We're never one-upping each other. We're just, and I want our viewers to understand that, in case you ever want to come on or ever want to write us a story or something like that, which would be greatly appreciated. We want you to know that it does not exist here.
We could share stories anonymously too. That might be interesting.
Absolutely.
If you share your story, just email us at sharinsstoriespodcast.com without a G. It's just IN. So
we are, yes, Sharin. Sharing Stories was taken on URL, and so we do not have the money to buy it. So I'd like to say this is going to wrap up our first podcast. I would like to say thank you both so much. And I want to let everybody know, go check out our website, sharinstories.com. If you want to, do not worry about it, but you can put your story up there. If you want to keep it separate and send it to us, you can also email us at sharinstoriespodcast@gmail.com. Exactly as Paul said, there's no G in sharing. It is Sharin. And we look forward to hearing from any of you as we go forward. And remember, We just want to have conversations. We just want to make this easier for everyone else. On top of that, we will have shirts coming out soon, and all proceeds generally are going to be going to a mental health fund. We are looking at Kevin Love's, what's the full name of it? Kevin Love's Mental...
Up Fund.
Okay, so we're going to be looking into that, but due to the light of times currently going on right now, our proceeds are going to be going to Kids of Color, ACLU, and Black Lives Matter Worldwide, as it is a pressing issue. So any shirt sold, a percentage of sales will be going to a charity in the future, mental health, currently to support Black lives in America. We thank you all so much. I'll let you guys sign us off, say anything else before we leave. And I appreciate you as well for reaching out and wanting to start this podcast with me after seeing the website.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
On Instagram at Sharin Stories.
Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. Click the button below, like and subscribe. Boom. Done it. Thank you all.
Woo!